Good evening, guys. Um, wow, I'm not prepared for this at all. So much has happened, so much has changed. Um, my plan for tonight is I'm going to go a little more off the cuff rather than what I usually do, which I usually take a lot of notes. Right now I have like 6 bullet points and they're really short because this is something that is like a grander scale of the topics that we've been talking about recently. A lot of the stuff that we've talked about recently is just current events, and obviously this is a current event, but this current event has a story behind it, and it's not really about what it says it's about. All right. So obviously, if you read the title, we're going to be talking about this Trump indictment. Donald Trump has been indicted 3 times. This one is now in the District of Columbia, which is probably his biggest anti-Trump district. But honestly, this case they have against him isn't the strongest. However, I'm not really going to talk about that much because it's not the case itself that we need to talk about. And this is his third. The first one was in New York, and it had to do with the 2016 election and election donation stuff. And that one's just honestly, that one's just kind of silly. That was just like the first one. The second one is probably the most threatening to Trump actually going to prison, and that's him keeping documents that were not declassified in Mar-a-Lago, and that one's in Florida. So he should have a favorable, some favorableness with the judge there. This new one, we've got an awful district, an awful judge. Nobody in Washington, D.C. really likes Trump, which is really unfortunate. I mean, the judge is this, I want to say, Cuban woman, or Jamaican woman, Jamaican immigrant, and she, is the only judge to prosecute January 6th protesters more than what the DOJ, what the prosecutors recommended. She sentenced them to more than that, which is rare. She's the only one, so not looking good for that angle. However, we're not even going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking specifically about what this is about, and it's not about January 6th, because January 6th is obviously about the 2020 election, but even then, this isn't inherently just about the 2020 election. This is about the Trump Revolution. And I talked about the Trump Revolution last week, but I didn't really go into what that meant. In 2016, I want to start from the beginning. In 2016, Donald Trump became the president of the United States. But this is before that. Whatever. We're going to start from the very beginning. All right? In 2015, we have Donald Trump announcing his campaign for presidency, going down the stairs, or going down the escalator at Trump Tower. He declares he's running for president. And this is a massive moment. He gives a speech talking about globalism and how he wants to put America first and how he wants to make America great again. And really, that sent shockwaves across the country. People in the establishment, people in the system, weren't really considering this to be a threat just yet. But it started there. Trump announces his campaign for presidency in 2015, and he comes out with an explosion. Big news, big press. Is a huge deal because obviously he's like a very famous guy. He's like a celebrity. I mean, this guy is well liked by almost everyone in America up until this point, and now he's running for president. But he set himself on course to go head to head with the system, to battle the establishment, not just the Republican establishment, not just the Democrats, not just the Congress, but the entire federal government establishment. And that's key to understanding this. Because what you have now is just another portion of a long list of ways this system and this establishment has been attacking Trump for 8 years. 8 years at this point. One man has been brutally attacked and has had his life torn and his friends taken from him for 8 straight years. And I don't really know how you can see this any other way. But we'll get to that. We're going to start in 2015. They don't really think he's a threat. He starts campaigning. He's making these speeches. People really love him. The people genuinely love him, but the other candidates don't. He says some stuff. He says some controversial things. One of my favorite things he ever says is on the debate stage where against Jeb Bush. And Jeb Bush says that his brother and his father made America safer than it had ever been, or whatever. And Trump says, in response, 9/11 happened while your brother was the president. And that was nuts. At the time, I was like, whoa. And then I thought about it, and I was like, yeah, wait a minute. Is that keeping Americans safe? Keeping Americans safe would have been preventing that from happening in the first place. And I don't want to go into the whole 9/11 thing. There's so many conspiracies and crap about that. I don't even know. All I know is that probably the way we're told isn't the full truth. But I don't really believe that it was a drone or any of that. I don't know. But we don't know. We'll never really know until something comes out, like what happened with the JFK assassination and the CIA's involvement there. But until then, we don't know. But what I'm talking about, it's this kind of stuff where Trump says to Jeb Bush, the Twin Towers came down when your brother was president. And that is indirect. That is a really fiery thing to say. It's in direct competition. It's going straight for the establishment who thought themselves heroes after 9/11. So Donald Trump sets him, I said, crash course for ramming himself at the establishment, at the system. But they're not just going to take it. And this is where this 8-year campaign to destroy Donald Trump starts. So the first thing is obviously this whole campaign, this primary campaign, and before he even became the nominee, when he was running, the RNC, I remember this specifically because it happened here in Cleveland and my parents were volunteering for the RNC, or at least they were there or something, I don't remember. I was young. But I remember specifically what happened. Ted Cruz told people to vote with their conscience and refused to support Trump. And that's really unusual. You don't really see that in political campaigns. You usually see, well, back in the day. Nowadays, who knows? You usually see when one person running backs out and the other person is given the nominee, they usually endorse them. Ted Cruz not only publicly refused on stage at the RNC in front of thousands, tens of thousands of people, said that he wasn't going to endorse Donald Trump. He said, you need to vote with your conscience. What does that mean? It means he's telling the voters not to vote for Trump. And that clearly shows from the beginning that even though you got Ted Cruz, who says he's the most conservative person out of any of these candidates, and frankly he was, probably even more conservative from a traditional socially conservative standpoint than Donald Trump. But he's refusing to endorse Trump, telling voters not to vote for him? Well, what's that all about? Well, it's because despite his conservatism and despite him being the most conservative candidate, he's part of the system, right? He's a senator from Texas. He's part of the system. He's part of the system that Donald Trump is putting himself on a crash course against. And he comes head to head with this system throughout the primaries and especially after he wins the election. Because even after he wins the primary, which nobody thought was possible in the beginning, and he's finally seeming to become a threat, and 95% of media reports are against him. 95%, that's insane. 95% are anti-Trump. Every single tenured professor in the entire country didn't support Trump. His campaign was spied on by the Obama administration. We still haven't gotten oh my gosh, wow. His campaign was spied on by the Obama administration. And I'm going to turn off my notifications just because I got a buzz. I don't want that to happen later. That's pretty annoying. But you know. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that. His campaign was spied on by the Obama administration. So we know once he became the nominee that they were starting to feel a little bit threatened by this man and his direct and angry attack at the system. And I should probably pull this up. I write about this. I'm writing something. I don't know if I'm ever going to share it. But it's talking about what an extremist is. And people always label people extremists nowadays. And that's something Donald Trump has been labeled from the beginning. And in this thing I'm writing, I don't even know what to call it, book, essay, whatever, I explain Donald Trump is an extremist. Because an extremist is somebody who goes against the status quo. Somebody who goes against the system, that despite all the system's maneuverings and power and cultural advantage and support from money to political power to influence, an extremist is somebody who, despite all that, goes against that system in whatever way possible. And Donald Trump is the definition of that. And extremists are the people who move society forward. Whether that's good or bad, extremists are the people that make changes in the world. Because the status quo, the system wants to uphold the status quo because the status quo is directly in line with the system, because the system creates the status quo. The status quo is the system. And the establishment that upholds the status quo is directly benefited by the status quo. And by somebody trying to challenge the status quo, whether that means a new invention, like, I don't know, nuclear power, for example, back in the day, or a candidate like Donald Trump, or a political force movement like Occupy Wall Street. These things are inherently extremist because they go against the system, they go against the status quo, and therefore the system, which upholds the status quo, must respond. And this is what I'm talking about here. So after Donald Trump is spied on by the Obama administration, his campaign spied on, and we never even got conclusion of that. Nobody was ever indicted or anything, even though we know it happened. He wins the election anyways, and he becomes president. Immediately is accused of colluding with Russia to win the election. Immediately. Like not even a month I don't even think he was president at the point. Immediately accused by Hillary Clinton and her campaign and the Obama administration of colluding with Russia. Turns out, completely BS. And the rest of these are too. But it's not the point that they're BS, but you need to see why they're doing it. And I just explained, it's the system. Donald Trump is attacking the status quo. And the status quo upholds the system. The system upholds the status quo upholds the system, because it's a mutually beneficial relationship. So by threatening the status quo, by threatening the system, Donald Trump puts himself at risk. And every single extremist, every single person that goes against the status quo does this. And so after he gets elected, you think, is he part of the system now? Not really, because he's still going against the status quo. He's only one man. And even within his administration, he appointed all these different people. You have people like Jared Kushner or other people, like people who talk to the New York Times, I forget the name, is like a whistleblower or something, talked to the New York Times and said, I'm directly trying to ambush the Trump administration from the inside. So we know there are people within the administration trying to sabotage Trump. And it's really, frankly, it all makes sense when you put it together. Because over these last 8 years, it's not been Trump making a bunch of mistakes. It's a man really succeeding, in my opinion, doing his best. And he's gotten further than anyone at this level of extremism, as I'm calling it, has ever gotten in the United States, because he's going directly against the status quo. And you could say Abraham Lincoln or whatever, but Abraham Lincoln at that point, 60% of the political force agreed with him. There was no real status quo, because everything was kind of shaken at that point. You just needed a figure to come in and force it somewhere. I can't really think of it. JFK maybe? JFK attacked the status quo, or what would eventually become the system. But really, I can't think of anyone like Donald Trump, any president really, who's been so vehemently against the system, and the system has responded with an equal and opposite reaction. I can't think of anyone. And people want to vote for other people. They're like, oh, Ron DeSantis is more conservative. But it's the same thing with Ted Cruz. And I can talk about this. Ron DeSantis today, in response to these indictments, has actually said that the 2020 election wasn't stolen. And Donald Trump is wrong. And he's running against Trump, but Trump made this guy's career. Ron DeSantis' career was made by Trump. If it weren't for Trump, Ron DeSantis never wins the nomination in Florida. He never becomes governor. So, this whole idea that Ron DeSantis is a better candidate because he's somehow more socially conservative is just ridiculous. Like, he's against gay marriage? Okay, well, Trump is against the system. Trump is one man fighting against the entire system. Ron DeSantis is just like Ted Cruz. Just like Ted Cruz. He's going to be more conservative. He's going to make better ads or whatever. He's going to say certain things that a lot of traditional conservatives and a lot of social conservatives and a lot of Christians and Catholics like me, Ron DeSantis is Catholic, and he's going to say a lot of stuff that's going to appeal to me. However, Ron DeSantis isn't fighting the system like Donald Trump is. And you can say Ron DeSantis has been attacked by the mainstream media and the left and stuff, but he's not been attacked by the right. He's not been attacked by the establishment right, at least not yet. In the same way that Donald Trump was in 2016 and in 2020 and always. You've got people to this day in the establishment right who still won't accept Donald Trump. But Donald Trump, at this point, what I'm talking about, I'm still talking about 2016, they refused to accept the election, and apparently that's okay in 2016, but when Trump does it in 2020, it's not okay. Also, a shout out to Sushi with a Sword. Thank you for saying real, because this is real. Israel? That's crazy. No, but this is so real. But two impeachments. One impeachment earlier in his presidency, and one in January of 2021 after January 6th. No other president ever in history has been impeached twice, much less indicted and been charged with, I think, 75 different things. I mean, this one we're going to talk about, and I'm going to talk about this indictment when we get to it. I have some big details. I'm going to read the introduction because it's inherently political. This indictment in itself is inherently political. There's nothing about it that doesn't scream, we're doing this to stop Trump. Because it's all along this line that I've been talking about. Trump is against the status quo. Trump is against the system. And this is just the system's retaliation. It has nothing to do with the actual crimes he's committed. It has nothing to do with this disclosed paperwork or whatever that he has in Mar-a-Lago. And really, it has nothing to do with Stormy Daniels in New York either, because it's all about Trump and the system and his fight against the system. I gotta think. I'm sorry. So Trump, he gets into office. First day, one of the first days he gets into office, he orders the Pentagon, and this is one of the big reasons he's against the system. This is one way he wants to stop the status quo. He orders the Pentagon to stop all the wars. He says we need to withdraw from Iraq, Afghanistan, even take out many of our troops in Europe, which is huge, and NATO and Europe. He wanted to force NATO to arm themselves. And this is inherently against what the system wants, because the system is upheld by their own greediness. The people within the system, and the system is this entity, but it's made up of people at the end of the day, and these people are benefited by the status quo. They're benefited by the system through different things like power, influence, and in this case, money. You got military contractors like Raytheon and Boeing and Lockheed Martin who donate millions upon millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars if you put it all together, to these different politicians' campaigns, and that eventually goes into the pockets, lining the pockets of these politicians. So obviously these politicians are going to be against, and the people within the deep state are going to be against Donald Trump stopping all these wars, because these people that give them money are directly benefited from these wars happening in the Middle East and in other places like Libya. Why did we bomb Libya? Because somebody needed a target. The government needed a target because, listen to this, Libya was not a threat. Libya had Gaddafi, right? What the hell did Gaddafi do? Gaddafi didn't have any nukes. He didn't have any missiles. The worst thing Gaddafi ever did is call for a jihad against Switzerland because Switzerland arrested his son. Gaddafi didn't do anything. In fact, Gaddafi made Libya one of the richest countries in all of Africa. But Gaddafi was against the system that I'm talking about. He opposed the international system. He didn't want to trade with the dollar and all this other stuff. But really, it wasn't what Gaddafi was doing. They just needed a target. And Gaddafi was a total asshole. He was a boogeyman, whatever. They just needed a target. They just needed money. So here's the deal. These military contractors said, hey, we want a lot of money. We want you guys, the government, to spend a ton of money on our weapons and our manufacturing and our planes and our guns and our bombs and our missiles, and we want to get rich. We want our pockets lined by the federal government and by the taxpayer. And the politicians said, well, if you donate to our campaigns, we can make that happen. And they made it happen. They said, we want a war in Libya. So it's this whole military-industrial complex, and day one, Donald Trump comes in and he says, we need this gone now. This is done. And they knew this was going to happen. And the generals and the congressmen were ready for it. And there was not a lack of retaliation. The generals refused. The generals said, we're going to continue, despite what you're saying. Donald Trump is the head of state, he's the head of the military, and he has the complete right to withdraw these people, but the generals, his generals, who are his employees, refused. And that's another case that I'm talking about of them, the system just fighting back. And he didn't get away with trying to get this military-industrial complex destroyed. Because Congress, Donald Trump ran on this border wall, he petitioned Congress, who was majority Republican, by the way. After the 2016 election, Congress, both houses, the lower and the upper, the Senate or the House and the Senate, were controlled by Republicans. So in theory, Donald Trump should be able to, as a Republican president, get what he wants. He should be able to provide something like a border wall. He should say, hey, can you provide funding for this border wall? And as Republicans, they, in theory, would agree. However, these Republicans are part of the system that I'm talking about. They're directly opposed to Donald Trump. And so, instead of giving him a border wall, they gave him a fence for like not even $1 billion, or not even $2 billion. They gave him like a border fence for like 100 miles. And that's nothing. Oh, I was going to type out a whole essay in here, but you're the one running the show. Hey, if you want to say anything, Sushi, I'd love to talk about it. If it's on topic, I can totally talk about it. I'm totally just like rambling right now. Because you can see my notes. It's nothing. It's like tenured professor Obama, 2 impeachments, refused border wall, the stuff I'm talking about right now, ordered Pentagon. Like, there's nothing really on here. I'm kind of just going off of memory because I lived through this. No, but the Republicans wouldn't let stuff get done, and there was a government shutdown, 2 government shutdowns. First with the Republicans in Congress, and second with the Democrats in Congress after 2018. And so you got this system trying with its full force, its full effort to stop Donald Trump. And now you have, in 2019 and 2020, Donald Trump is running for re-election. And it's seriously, it's crazy. We had COVID, we had all this stuff. And COVID was a perfect excuse for the system. Because in 2016, 35% of ballots, 35% of voting came in from mail-in ballots. You had to request one. You had to be a registered voter. And in 2020, that over doubled. It was over 70%. And that was because the ballots came in. They were sent to everyone, not just registered voters, anyone that could be a registered voter. And so, no matter if you were going to vote, if you plan on voting, if you were even registered, if you even lived there, dead people, old people, dead people, people who moved away from the state, they received these ballots in the mail because everyone, you didn't even have to request it. You usually have to request, you have to get your ID and stuff, and I'm having to do that right now for the primary because I'm going to school in a different state. But you usually have to deal with that stuff. But in 2020, COVID provided this perfect excuse. And that led to there obviously being a mass level of fraud in the 2020 election. The largest election in American history. Biden got over 80 million votes. Joe Biden, have you seen this guy? And we can talk about his corruption and stuff, but even that's not what it is, because everyone in the system is corrupt. Everyone is lining the pockets of their family. Everyone is lining the pockets of themselves. It's not just Joe Biden. And obviously, I think Donald Trump, for the mainstream person, I kind of like Donald Trump saying this stuff because it's really exposing Biden as a corrupt person. And in 2020, it didn't come off that way. People wouldn't let Trump talk about Hunter Biden and that whole situation. And with all this information and this stuff that has like solidified this corruption in Biden, and Trump talks about the Biden criminal family or whatever, I think to the average person, that's honestly a pretty good move running on that. But not just that. I think Trump is at war with not just Biden, but the whole system. But the average person, that worked in 2016, but the average person, I don't think, is really that excited by that, maybe. I think it can work. And I think Trump can talk about how he's running against this system. He's running against the the status quo and the corruption and the politicians, because Trump isn't a politician. Trump is a businessman. And he always has been, and he always will be. But Trump is my hero. So I want him to run against the system, and I want him to say, I'm at war with the system. And Joe Biden is just their head. He's just the facade of the system. And look, the system is so corrupt, the facade has become corrupted itself. That's how crazy this is. That's how bad this system is. The facade of the system, Joe Biden, who's supposed to be this wholesome old guy who doesn't even do anything. He's just this wholesome old guy who gets his chocolate chunk and hangs out with his family and has a dog who pisses on the floor because he can't take care of it. He's just this wholesome old guy who doesn't really know what's going on. He's this facade for the system, and the system is so corrupt, it's so bad, that even the facade of the system is corrupt. It's leaking through. I think of it as like a shade, the blinds, right? You got a window, and outside the window, you've got hell, right? And you got shit just outside, and you got these blinds so you can't see the shit. And guess what? The shit is so bad, it's seeping through those windows. It's seeping through the blinds, all right? It's so bad that nothing can hold it back. The corruption is so deep, it's so bad that the facade Joe Biden is involved. And I think, honestly, that's a good running point, and people might disagree with me on that. I know a lot of people are like, oh, but like Marjorie Taylor Greene, she showed a picture of Hunter Biden penis. That's not what I'm talking about. Nobody gives a crap that Hunter Biden is smoking crack with hookers, because like Hunter Biden isn't the president, Biden's the president. It's the fact that Biden's involved in getting Hunter millions and millions of dollars for the family, that Hunter pays off his father's expenses with his dealings in Ukraine and in China, with his company that he is working for, because he's the son of the president of the United States, or at the time vice president, and he has this level of influence, and he can use his connections through his father to make his companies that he's working with more money. Man, I need water. But yeah, we've got Donald Trump, and he's not corrupt. You can say he's done all these bad things. Well, I'm going to get to that. We're not even there. We're on this timeline. I'm still talking about this timeline. So where are we? We're in 2020. The election happens. There's a red mirage. It looks like Trump's going to win, and then this over 71%, 70% or whatever of mail-in ballots start coming in, and it's these crazy numbers, and Biden just starts winning. And Trump immediately starts calling BS. And for the next nearly 3 months, 2.5 months, Trump is campaigning again after the election. Stop this deal. We need to stop it. And he's trying to go to the state legislators to have a recount, or to find the flaws and to see, look, we need to figure this out. He appeals to the Supreme Court, all this other stuff. Totally legal methods of, trying to stop this election, trying to overturn the election. It's completely legal. And now we get to January 6th. And this is where we get to this indictment today. And there are some other things that happened, obviously, since January 6th. But this indictment is specifically about January 6th. Here we go. Former President Donald J. Trump made an appearance in Washington, D.C. courtroom to answer charges that he used, quote, unlawful means in an attempt to subvert the results of the 2020 presidential election. He pleaded not guilty. The indictment charges Trump with conspiracy. First of all, conspiracy. What does that mean? So it's not saying that he did these things, but he like tried to, and it's harder to prove really, or it's easier to prove really, but it means that he didn't succeed or whatever, but he tried to, and it's like this. It's a law term, and it's really dumb. He can't get charged as much because he had the conspiracy, he had the thought to do it. The indictment charges Trump with conspiracy to defraud the United States. Usually that means like taking money and like using the government, taking the government, like basically lining your pockets or whatever, what literally everyone in Congress does. And Donald Trump didn't do, because Donald Trump's a multi-billionaire and he doesn't need to do that. He doesn't need to line his pockets with government money. He's a billionaire. And that's one thing I loved about Trump, and I still do. Conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. And so that's referring to Congress, and on January 6th, the congressional hearings that were supposed to take place to confirm Joe Biden as the winner of the election. He tried to get his vice president, Mike Pence, to not call out the votes for certain states, and he called on people to protest outside the Capitol and not to go in. You all know what happened. But Trump didn't tell them to do that. Trump had nothing to do with that. Trump was never in the building. Obviously, he never called on people to specifically stop the congressional hearings from happening. And so conspiracy, like he never even tried. He never even wanted to. So that's just total BS. Obstruction and conspiracy against the right to vote and to have one's vote counted. So, what? Like, Trump went totally legally. Like, unless you're trying to say he, like, tried to coup the government, which is just insane. It's just ridiculous. Like, even people on the left are like, okay, January 6th was just a kind of a riot. It wasn't really a coup. He didn't want to, like, there was no, like, armed forces trying to, like, these were just, like, protesters. They couldn't do anything. And that's a big one, isn't it? Conspiracy against the right to vote and to have obstruction. Not just conspiracy, obstruction against the right to vote and to have one's vote counted. Because obstruction of somebody's right could be, I think, life in prison. Or even the death penalty in certain cases, I think. But we all know that's total BS. He fought the system through the system. He fought each of these cases in these states, and he didn't, like, that's usually something where people, like, physically stop people from going to the ballot box or stop somebody, like, you're not allowed to vote because I don't like you or whatever. This has nothing to do with that. The election already happened. Like, the election happened. That's just total BS. But that's not the point. The point is what I'm saying. It's just another one of these things. It's another ticky-tack thing. Trump is against the system. He's at war with the system. He's one man against the system. This is just another thing. And the reason why I'm talking about it now is because it shows just how political this really is. They're showing their true colors finally. And this is really invigorating Trump's base. They're going to be more loyal to him than ever. And, I don't know if this will help him in the election at all, but it's showing that these things that they've done against Trump the past 8 years have not been about reality. It has nothing to do with Trump doing something wrong. It has nothing to do with morals. It has nothing to do with legal codes. It has nothing to do with Trump doing anything wrong. It specifically has to do with Trump being at war with the system, being at war with them. And honestly, I think it's obvious. It's obvious that this is completely political, and it's so obvious that I'm going to read their introduction. It's 9:10. Oh my gosh. I've gone on about this for an hour and 10 minutes with like very few notes. 6 bullet points, 5 bullet points. I'm kind of impressed with myself, I'm honestly. So here's this. Introduction. The defendant, Donald J. Trump, was the 45th President of the United States and a candidate for re-election in 2020. The defendant lost the 2020 presidential election. Despite having lost, which first of all, I disagree with, the defendant was determined to remain in power. Despite having lost, the defendant was determined to remain in power. So for more than 2 months following the election day on November 3rd, 2020, the defendant spread lies that there had been an outcome determinative fraud in the election and that he had actually won. These claims were false, and the defendant knew that they were false, but the defendant repeated and widely disseminated them anyways. You don't think Donald Trump believed his statements? You think he just did this to stay in power? That's just outrageous. Have you seen the speeches? Have you seen how dedicated he was? He stayed up day and night. Was this to stay in power after they attacked him and killed him for 4 years on end? No. Donald Trump believed. You could see it in his heart. You could see it in his face. You could see it when he gets off that helicopter and he looks all tired and sad. Because he knows that he's at war with the system. Donald Trump didn't think he lost the election. Not once did he doubt. I know that. I know him. I've never met him. I've seen him in person. I've never met him. I've never shaken his hand. I've listened to almost all of his speeches. He believed it. And remember that. He believed it. So that's total BS. He knew he won. He had total trust and total faith that he had won. To make his knowingly false claims appear legitimate, create an intense national atmosphere of mistrust and anger, and erode public faith in the administration of the election. Donald Trump had been eroding public faith in the system for 4 years because he's at war with the system. Because the system is totally corrupt. Because there's nothing to have faith in. And Trump was just exposing that. There's no faith to be had in the system. I mean, we know that now. I mean, I've known that for years. Donald Trump knew that. So eroding the public faith in the administration of the election, he's just exposing the truth, in my opinion. So, yeah. You can tell that it's totally political in itself. And this whole thing is political. From the very start, none of this had to do with Trump doing something wrong. You think Ted Cruz didn't want to support Trump because Trump said effer right in the P word? No, Ted Cruz didn't want to support Trump because Ted Cruz is part of the system and Trump opposed that system. It's just politics. All right. So it is 9:14. I think that was a pretty good monologue. Wow. What's that, 74 minutes? Well, I may have been like 2 minutes late, maybe. 1 minute late. We've got, maybe this guy's still in chat? Or I have no idea. But we might do the same thing we did last week with Twitter. Or not. I don't know. We'll see what's trending. Hey, he's here. He's here. Do you have any questions? You want me to talk about anything specific? Otherwise, I don't know. If there's anything specific you want me to talk about, I can talk about it. Anything related to this, anything else, except for certain things that can get me banned off YouTube. But Uh, I'll talk about really anything, like music, politics, culture, like history. I love all of it. I mean, I have a world map right there. Oh, my account is suspended. Oh wait, this is my old account, my old Twitter account. I forgot I have a totally new Twitter account. What's trending on Twitter? Trump arrest. Okay, we just talked about that for an hour and 15 minutes. Nothing is going on. Some MLB stuff. I mean, how about this? They're not just going after Trump, they're going after Trump's friends. I mean, Vince McMahon, they're going after him. He's just like an associate of Trump. I don't think he ever endorsed Trump. He's just like friends with him and business partners with him. They're going after him for this. Jeez. All right, let's see. I liked what you said about extremists being the ones who shift the political climate. St. Constantine, St. Alfred the Great, Washington, Trump, all extremists. Completely true. And speaking of St. Constantine, I can pull this out. I've got a shield with the Chi Rho on it. And if you know St. Constantine. St. Constantine had a vision from Christ. And that's what made him an extremist. I don't think Christians were like popular like religion, but they were like a cult at that point. Like people really had a public kind of. I mean, it was extremely popular, and it wasn't the majority, but it was getting close up to that point. But still, the majority of people in power, the majority of people who were very wealthy, were pagan, and that continued for another 200 years, to be honest. The aristocratic class in ancient Rome was still very pagan after Constantine. But Constantine was just like Trump in the way that this entire political force, and Constantine obviously had millions of followers as well, millions of supporters. I want to say it was Bishop, oh my gosh, either Clemens of Alexandria or Bishop in Carthage. What was his name? I think it was Clemens of Alexandria. There's another guy in Carthage. But there's some bishop in North Africa when Constantine was alive. I believe it was Clemens of Alexandria, who I might be totally wrong about that. I think it might also be this other guy from Carthage, but whatever. There's some bishop, and he like basically like said that Constantine is like this hero, and he's like this new prophet, and this is because these extremists, when they succeed, because they're going against the system, they're creating their own system, they get this like cult-like followings. People, and I'm not saying they're all good, but people like Hitler, people like Mussolini, people like St. Constantine, people like Trump, even some bad, I'm not saying that Hitler wasn't bad. YouTube, do not ban me, okay? Even some people like Stalin and Mao's a great example. Mao's a horrible person. Completely, probably one of the worst people of all time, killed more people than anyone ever in history. But he had this cult-like following because he completely opposed this Chinese system, this warlord, kingdom, emperor system that had existed, this dynastic system that had existed for literally 4,000 years. And I'm not a big fan of Mao. He was an awful person. But he was going against this system, and he was a total extremist. And extremists can be good, and extremists can be bad. But at the end of the day, extremists is what they are. And St. Constantine was a saint, and he was a hero, and personally, I love him. And he was completely an extremist. He totally went against the Roman system, totally against the Roman aristocratic class, and he had almost no support except from his army, which also saw the vision, who also painted their shields with the Chi Rho and said, we're going into battle for Christ and for Constantine, because, like I said, as an extremist, when you succeed, you have this cult-like following because your message is just so powerful. Yeah, Washington, total extremist. I mean, these guys that founded our country, you want to talk about extremists? Like, the Boston Tea Party was an extreme. It was a terrorist attack. Like, we were founded on terrorism. We were founded on extremism. We, as a country, the United States was founded upon terroristic extremists who developed this cult-like following, like Washington, and that's why he won unanimously, because he was an extremist who went completely against the British and completely against their system. It was basically him against the world, him and this political support of his, but they weren't even political at that point because they were just guys. They were just writers and publicists and people who would go around maybe giving speeches, but they didn't really have any political influence or political power. The only real political power that the revolutionaries in America held was George Washington, his cult-like support, his cult-like following, and that was because of his success in battle and his way he could lead an army. When an extremist is successful, they develop a cult-like following, and that's why Washington was our first president. And that's why he was able to win the Revolutionary War, and that's why America is a country today. We were founded upon extremism, and we were founded upon cult-like followings. And people love to say fascism is cult-like followings. Fascism is like a figurehead, and this cult is personality cult. But it's not that, because anything can be that. Anything that's extreme and succeeds will have that result, because every time you have an extremist who succeeds, they're going to have a cult-like following, whether that be somebody who's a Republican, a Democrat, like somebody who's a revolutionary, like Napoleon, or well, Napoleon wasn't a revolutionary, he was the emperor, but he totally opposed the revolutionary system that had only existed for about 10 years at that point. He developed this cult-like following because even though he was returning to more or less a similar status quo from before the revolution, but in a new social liberty aspect added on, he was still an extremist compared to the revolutionaries because he was opposing their status quo. And you always develop these cult-like followings in every example. And you can't blame that from happening, because great men attract great followings. That's just how the world works. That's just how history works. Oh, no. Yeah, no. Using extremist as a synonym with evil is ignorant. It's completely ignorant. You're totally right. And I should send you this, because I'm writing this thing. I haven't actually added into it in months. And I can probably send you it. If you contact me afterwards, I have like this whole thing written up. You can pull it up on Drive right now. What's it even called? I don't even remember. But yeah, because extremist is just somebody who's opposed and opposes the culture and the status quo at that time. And that status quo constantly changes throughout history. You get different societies and different cultures and different things, and those change. An extremist 70 years ago and an extremist now are two completely different things. And they can be on any end of any spectrum, but they're the ones who change. They're the ones who make the changes, because without extremists, without people who oppose the status quo, you're going to have an infinite status quo. You're going to infinitely be within that system, within that status quo. And so anyone who changes that status quo is an extremist, because they're going against it, because they're going to have the weight of 1,000 rocks. They're going to have immense pressure on them to not change the status quo, because obviously the system is upholded by the status quo, and the status quo is upholded by the system. So it's just, like I said, a mutually beneficial relationship. And when an extremist, any single person that changes the status quo is an extremist. When that person goes and attacks the status quo, the system who upholds and is upheld by needs to respond. Here we go. Is this the right account? So many different emails. This should be the right account. Here, what's this called? Oh, maybe it's not the right account. Yeah, DM me on Twitter. I'll send it to you. I also like what you said about Lincoln. There's a draft for an amendment that wouldn't allow Congress to federally ban slavery, and he just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Yeah, we all say that Lincoln is people are like, he's the greatest president in history, but the reason why I oppose that is because he had so much political support. At that point, the entire industry, the entire economy that was important for the most part of the United States was in the North, and the North almost completely opposed slavery. He had almost full and total support politically from one side. So he wasn't an extremist. He didn't have to go through the effort and the peril that somebody like Donald Trump, like even Theodore Roosevelt or George Washington had to go through, because he wasn't opposed by the people. He wasn't opposed by the system. He just wasn't, because the system was going that direction anyways. Theodore Roosevelt I love because he was totally opposed by the system. He was just this immense political force as in New York City, and I believe he was the governor of New York. He's just this immense political force that William McKinley said, I'm going to lose the election if I don't appoint this guy as my vice president. So he appointed as his vice president. Turns out William McKinley dies. And guess who's president? But one of the greatest men we've all ever had in office, just because they thought if they had him in a vice president position, they'd be able to handle him from the inside. Turns out you can't handle a guy when his boss dies. So I guess you could say he was in the right place at the right time too. However, still he had an entire political force against him. He was a progressive at the time when both parties were against progressives. And progressive then was different than progressive now, obviously. But Teddy Roosevelt did not have support from his own party, and that's why when he ran against Taft, he wasn't allowed the nominee. And that's why I think it's a good comparison between Trump and Teddy Roosevelt, because Trump was almost rejected the nominee. People are trying to oppose him now when he's trying to run again. It was the same thing with Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt was the president. He said, hey, I'll let Taft run or whatever, when he didn't like Taft because Taft was like Teddy Roosevelt, but for the system. He tried to run against Taft, but the Republicans were like, we want our system guy, and so he ran as the third party. Yeah, so here, where is this? Second thoughts, that's not it. Geography, this is not the right account. This can't be the right account. Computers, automatically synced, like, come on. It's gotta be modified. Yeah, last modified. What account is this on? Getting started, that's not it. Wait, what account am I totally thought it was this account. Okay, whatever, I can send it to you. Yeah, DM me. Do I have messages blocked on Twitter and Instagram? Oh, jeez. If you DM me on Instagram, I can accept the request. Like, either way. And I have my email. Here, I'll put my email. If Instagram doesn't work, totally DM me on Instagram. If it doesn't work, I'm putting my email. What is it? I think it's this. I don't even know my own email. I think it's this. Yeah. Wait. But yeah, just DM me on Instagram. I think it'll go as a request, but I can send that to you. Oh, here it is. I found it actually. I don't know why it wasn't there. Here. So I've been writing this. It's called "Extremism is Necessary," and it's this great painting as the title. And I'll read the little bit. It's pretty good. In contemporary politics, extremist is a perpetually used characterization of people who defy the set bounds of what is considered reasonable by society at said point in time. It is used as a buzzword by the people who are in charge to define the border of what is right and wrong under their regime. These people are the establishment. The establishment isn't a set group of people. In fact, the establishment is often incorrectly used as an adjective to describe more moderate politicians from both political parties. Oftentimes, even the people who use this terminology are supporting the establishment themselves. However, this doesn't necessarily make them part of the establishment, nor does being part of institutions that hold up this establishment. The establishment is extremely liquid in nature. It is defined by the people who uphold society in its current state. The people who fight against radical changes to that society, even changes that are incredibly needed. At first glance, this may simply resemble conservatives. However, it is just as much liberals or quote unquote progressives who fight against real progress as conservatives. Since all these aforementioned ideologies are readily accepted by the society, they must have been deemed harmless to the establishment. So why do people gladly join and support this establishment if it represses real progress? There are two main reasons, and I can send you the thing. I'm still working on it right now. One, they benefit from the society staying this way. This reason is the most common among people in powerful positions. For them to stay in those positions of power, there must not be any radical changes. This affects all people who are very higher ups of This affects all people who are in the very higher ups of society. Anyone from multinational business owners to actors. This does not disclude non-political figures, because politicians aren't the only ones who gain from societal stagnation. For example, a natural gas producer would not want radical support for nuclear power, so would spend billions to suppress it or make it seem dangerous. This actually happened. Two, they're afraid of change. Many people only know how to live a certain way. They couldn't imagine radical changes to their way of life, even good changes. Most people are naturally afraid of change and new things. They're comfortable the way they are, and they don't want that to change. This is often used by the establishment for its benefit. Make people comfortable, they become complacent. They'll accept more and more power and wealth into the hands of the establishment as long as they don't have to face change. Compliance is dangerous, and this is a tactic the establishment constantly uses. This isn't just the only method the establishment uses to uphold the status quo. Not only does the establishment use the fear of change to create compliance, they actively suppress real ideas of change. The media is the right arm of the establishment. Mainstream media sources can never be a threat to the establishment because that's exactly what they are, mainstream. For something to be mainstream, it must have been accepted by said establishment. Even when mainstream news sources disagree, they disagree within the bounds that the establishment sets. The claim of the existence of, quote, freedom of the press is bogus. How does the media make money? Through advertising. The advertisements and money don't just come from anywhere. It comes from other powerful corporations. Corporations who, as we established earlier, benefit from the existing conditions. This means that the media's pockets are filled by people who do not want change. Therefore, to guarantee further income, the media won't say anything to promote real progress, since that progress may hurt their profits. This doesn't even take into account the state-controlled or funded media, which is obviously biased towards the establishment. Many state-funded news medias claim to be neutral. However, this is incorrect. They're at most centrist. What this entails is being at the very center of what the establishment deems acceptable. There may be no bias towards either side. However, they reject anything that lies outside the walls of acceptable ideology. Similarly to state-controlled media, the public school system is one of the most effective methods the establishment... Okay, I'm done. I've read this for so long. It's 9:34. This is my longest episode ever. If you want to see the rest of that, just message me somewhere. I'm still working on it. It's not even halfway done. There's about 4 or 5 pages left of that. We're on page like 6, 7. So that just keeps going. It's really good. I like it. Have you thought about... Oh, geez. Have you thought about taking a writing course? Yeah, I'm taking a writing course in college this semester. I'm in the honors college at my university. So even though if I wasn't in the honors college, I could have totally skipped past all of that because I tested out of it with the SAT and stuff. ACT, SAT scores, tested out of all of it because my scores are so ridiculous. They're so high. I don't, right now, I don't have to take another math course the rest of my time in college, or even English or writing or anything. But I decided to join the honors college and or apply, and I got in. And so I have to take a writing and reading course because it's required to get that honors diploma. And I love writing. Sometimes it's a bit boring, but there's an art to it, you know. I feel like just getting my thoughts, because I have time to think, just getting that down somewhere where I can go back and say, wow, that's really good. I love it. And people love to just spew information, research, spit out facts and stuff like Ben Shapiro. Facts don't care about your feelings. I care more about political philosophy than facts. I care more about the theoretical, understanding it at like a fundamental level, and like writing about it in a sort of poetic way than the facts, the statistics. Like, I think all that stuff I'm writing about, like, you can just look at it in real life. Like, people are like, provide proof. And I talked about the nuclear thing, and I was like, but like, just look around you. Like, do you need proof of that? Do you need stats that the government upholds the status quo? I mean, I explained why they do, why it's beneficial to them, and how they do it. Do you really need like stats and statistics and specific lawsuits and pieces of information there? Like, I think you can just think as an independent person. You don't need that's why I don't like the whole facts, don't care about your feelings thing. I love like I love statistics and stuff, but saying that it's the basis of everything is just incorrect, because you'll never get to the fundamentals. You'll never find the reason why if you just look at the base stats and finding the fundamentals, finding the reason why has nothing to do with statistics. It's just thinking. It's just using your experiences, using what you know, and that could be some statistics, but for the most part, it's not. It's just using what you know and basically saying, how does this work? And look at the world around me. Why does it work like this? And I love that. I love thinking about that. I love thinking about those kind of things, and I love writing it down. And like sometimes I'll be at work and I just need a break, and I'll go to the bathroom, and I've been like thinking about things at work for like an hour, and all my hands are dirty from work. And I did this earlier today, and I just go to a group chat with me and my friends, and I'll just type down. I'll just be like, yeah, you know what, modern, like yesterday or the day before or whatever, I was like talking about materialism, and just like I was thinking, people today feel so, and Ted Kaczynski talked about this. Obviously he was a terrorist, but he was an extremist, just like we were talking about. He fundamentally opposed the system, and the system opposed him. But he killed people, whatever. We can still learn from his ideas. So Ted Kaczynski talked about this. People today, they don't feel fulfilled because they're constantly wanting more. And I talked to my friends because I was talking about this. I was just like thinking about it in my head, and I had to write it down in like a Snapchat group chat. And I was just like, today people are happy momentarily. They buy things, they want to make more money because they want to be happy, because everything's materialistic. You buy a new car, you feel happy for a month, but after that, who cares, right? Or in 10 years, who cares? What really makes people happy is connections. It's relationships with others, being one with Christ, and that's one with love. It's loving others and being loved, and doing the right thing, and holding yourself up to principles and succeeding. And it has nothing to do with materialism. It's all about the soul. It's all about things that are permanent rather than things that are impermanent, because impermanent things will always give you an impermanent happiness. Permanent things like soul, like love, like relationships, like the way you impact others, the legacy you leave, those give you permanent happiness. Those give you fulfillment. Those make you full. And that's what we know from Christ. Christ fills you up. And Christ is permanent. Christ has been, always has been, and always will be. And that's how you become happy. There was one guy who was a pretty good writer and speaker. He was a pretty effective politician from Yeah, yeah, I know exactly who you're talking about. And, he was effective. He was definitely an effective guy. And I can't say his name on here, and I can't say what he talked about, but, and I can't say even if I like him or if I dislike him because, you know, I mean, I don't know. I can't say anything on here. I can't give my true. I mean, I'm not gonna say my true opinion is any of that because at the end of the day, I don't think that guy was fully, totally Christian. I don't think he was Catholic, and I think a lot of the things that ended up happening under his regime are a result from that. I'm a larger fan of his Italian counterpart or his Spanish counterpart because they were Catholic. But I don't know. I'm not. He was effective. He was probably the most effective person at getting his message out there and getting people to agree with him. And you can't deny that, whether you like him or dislike him. And for the most part, I'm not gonna say anything. I'm not gonna say who he is. I don't really like him because he wasn't Catholic. I think he was Protestant, maybe, or pagan, but I know he wasn't Catholic. But I don't know. He was effective. You can't deny that. As a leader, oh my, who is calling me? My whole phone is buzzing. I feel like Daniel Larson. Who the hell is calling me? I'm getting a call. I'm getting the call. You know what I'm talking about? I'm getting the call. No, I'm not. Okay, I don't like the guy who ruled Germany from 1933 to 1945. However, as a history buff, I cannot deny his effectiveness as a leader and his ability to unite his nation. And you know, he was effective. He did good things for his country. He did bad things, but he did good things too. And from a historical perspective, you got to look at it from the time, the place, and people don't do that nowadays. I'm walking it back. I'm walking it back. I'm walking it back. Okay, you're like, we're on YouTube, dude. You're like trying to yell at me, like, you gotta talk, and I'm just like, I gotta walk it back. I'm in college, man. I'm not, and I'm like Catholic. Okay, I don't like people dying. All right, I'm not a fan of people dying. Okay. So like I like like I like what the Italian he tried to use like economic ways to gain whatever, and he didn't kill. I mean he wasn't very effective militarily, but you know he wasn't as effective as a leader. But I'm walking it back. I'm walking it back. Oh man, all right. Well, it's 9:44. If you got anything else, man, but I'm walking it back. I gotta walk it back because I'm not the biggest fan of him, and I'm trying to appeal to my audience here by saying, you know, he did good things or he did bad things, but people aren't good or bad. People aren't evil or good except for people who are fully good, like Jesus Christ or Mary, because Mary was a sinless woman. People aren't fully good, people aren't fully bad, and you got people like him or like his Italian counterpart, which I don't even think I can say his name on here, or you got Churchill or Stalin. And at the end of the day, I think what we have to recognize is that they did good things and they did bad things. Everyone has done good things, everyone has done bad things, and some more bad than others, but you know, it is what it is. So I don't like the guy personally, not a fan. But you know, he was an effective leader. He did good things for his country. He did bad things for his country too. But you just got to look at it from a historical perspective. And we're on YouTube, and I can't say his name, and I can't even say the good things that he did, or the bad things that he did for that matter, because we're on YouTube and we can't talk about any of that. But you got to look at it historically from his time. And yeah, you just, it's people do bad things and people do good things, and you just got to recognize that. And nowadays, like, people calling us to reject and to denounce and to say these people back in the day were just so awful. In 100 years, people are probably going to think we are awful too. I don't know what the future holds, but things change. And the opinions that society holds at one point aren't the opinions they'll always hold. And so we'll always look back in disgust, which is really sad. I think we should look back and be happy at the things that the people that founded our nation have done. And you can say we bombed Libya and we did Iraq or whatever, but fuck, those were cool. Like, waste of money, kill millions of people, like awful atrocities. Like, there's no reason for us to do them. But man, the B-2 bomber is pretty freaking cool. So, you gotta take everything with a grain of salt. Every single thing, always. Including what I'm saying now. So, I think that's a good way to end it. Not a fan of Mr. Germany, but he was an effective leader. He led his people, and I want to say he probably had like a crazy approval rating. But he also led them into his country being split in half between two ideologically awful empires that wanted to destroy the people there. I mean, you can talk about the genocide. I want to say like 2.5 million Germans died after being exiled in Poland, the Soviet Union, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia, France, Luxembourg, Belgium, the Netherlands, Denmark. Where else? Lithuania. I want to say 2.5 million Germans died, and you can probably put that at his fault, but he tried to do what he thought, like, maybe he was a little crazy at the end. He wasn't I don't like the guy. He tried to do what he thought was right until the end, when I think he was just a little nuts. And I think he was always a little bit of a nutcase. But he was an effective nutcase, You can say that about a lot of people. Stalin was totally a nutcase. Stalin was crazy, just like this guy. They're both crazy, but they're so effective. Stalin ruled with fear. This guy, Mr. Germany, also ruled with, I don't know if he necessarily ruled with fear the amount that Stalin did. They were both effective leaders, and they did bad things. They both did awful things, and they both did good things. You cannot say that Stalin didn't win the largest war in the history of wars and made his country from an unindustrialized wasteland to the second largest, the largest, most powerful country in the entire world in the matter of a decade and a half. So but he also killed 13 million Ukrainians. So you got every person does bad and every person does good, and it's almost 10 o'clock, and I gotta go. So, yeah, I don't like the guy, but he did good things. He was an effective leader, and same thing with Stalin. Yeah. Yeah. Ooh, look at this outfit. This fit goes hard. Look at this. I feel like one of those like old guys, Yeah, I feel like I'm I don't know. I feel like an old guy here with this whole fit. That was a long episode, almost 2 hours. That's crazy. It's gonna be days until this actually gets uploaded. So yeah. Yeah, God be with you, bro. Have a great night. God bless you. It's gonna be a while until this gets uploaded, by the way. So this is probably gonna get re-uploaded, and then it's gonna be on Spotify as an audio format. but it's so long and in such high quality because of my recording device that it's going to be about probably 2 days until it gets re-uploaded. So good night.